Job chapter 2. Last week we saw that this behind the scenes glimpse that we get to look at Job's life and how he is targeted by Satan with the permission of God. And God gives him a parameter of you can touch whatever he has, but you cannot touch his you can't touch him personally, physically. And Satan goes to the extreme. It's not, I'm going to take all of his livestock and see what happens. He takes everything, including his 10 children, all at one time. Everything he has. And the accusation by Satan of Job was that if you take everything he has, if you take this protection of his stuff, he only loves you. He only loves you for the things you've given him. If you take it all away, he'll curse you to his face or to your face. God says, go for it. Satan does in a horrific way, really. And Job's response is to tear his robe, and justifiably so, to be in a state of mourning, shave his head, and falls to the ground and worships. Doesn't fall to the ground and curse God. There's no cursing going on here. There's nothing except the recognition of who God is, that he is the one who gives, he is the one who takes away. Everything is in his hands to begin with. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin nor charge God with wrong. And so he knows who God is. As we go through this book, we're going to find out that Job has great insight into God, into the Messiah, and then into the need for redemption, all of that. But we're not going to get into that part of the story until we get through one more time here. In this chapter 2 is going to describe another hit that he's going to take. So chapter 2 verse 1 says, again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, from where do you come? So Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil? And still he holds fast to his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without cause. All right? So, there it is. There was no reason to do this. Satan didn't have a reason to do it, other than this was a righteous, to take God's opinion of Job, one who is more righteous than anybody else on the face of the earth, one who fears God, shuns evil. He has a relationship with God. This is not a torturous fear where he's afraid he's going to die, or, he's not tormented. He's not anxious about God. Just seeks to honor him, understands who he is, where everything comes from. Everything he had was given by God, and everything he had was God's to take. And his integrity held fast. He did not hold that against God, that everything was lost. He simply submitted himself, like he always did, to God. So verse 4 says, so Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin. Yes, all that a man has he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will surely curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, he is in your hand, but spare his life. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with painful boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And he took for himself a potsherd with which to scrape himself while he sat in the midst of ashes. Then his wife said to him, do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die. But he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not adversity? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Yeah. How how does she know about the conversation between Satan and the Lord? I don't think she does. This is a woman Job is not the one who's lost everything. Right. And she's throwing out and encouraging what Satan said would happen. No. I don't think she's possessed. I don't think she's a tool of Satan even. This is a woman who has lost everything herself. He's not the only one who's lost all of this. All of her provision, 10 children that she's been a mother to, all came on her in the same day. And now the one she would look to physically for security. I mean, you can lose all of that and still look at your husband and say, okay, well, we can start over. And Job is probably, we'll start. God will bless. He'll build us back up again. She has seen his righteousness and his righteous decisions bring what was there before. His walking before the Lord in a righteous way. That's maybe the only thing she has left to hang on to. And now this. Now he's sick. Now he's covered in boils. I mean, this is not now he's got the flu. This is he looks like he's going to die. These are boils. These are sores. He's unclean. I mean, if he's going by any kind of law concerning making sacrifices, if it's anything like the law that will be written after his time, after Abraham's time, the law given to Moses, he can't even offer a sacrifice. He would be considered unclean. I mean, he's not probably a leper, but he's got boils, and if you know anything about a boil, whether you ever had one or you've ever seen one, it's not pretty. And that's just one. He's covered in them. They're painful. They're gross. You're going to see as we go through the book, his skin is turning black. He's got worms. He's got, he can't eat. He's wasting away. This isn't easy for her to see. And, it would be easy to see. I think really what we're going to see from his friends and their accusation of there's got to be some kind of wrongdoing in Job's life to be this way, I think it just accelerated in her. Maybe, anything would be better than this, than to just waste away like this. And maybe she's crossed over into her own little self-preservation. If he would just die, I can move on. Because she can't. And what do you do for this guy? You don't know. Nobody's going to want to touch him. Nobody's going to want to be around him. And, even his friends, you don't see that they're nursing him while they're talking to him. They come to be with him. But, you would look at him and say, I don't know if he's contagious. I don't, The potsherd, he's scraping the sores. So he's probably lancing his own sores while this is going on. But then he's dealing with, we'll see later, with bugs and whatever else, and infection and fever. And he's just not good. And I've heard just in this last fall when the flu season really kind of started kicking in, people getting this sinus and cold and it hurts, they're achy, and they say you're really for like 2 or 3 days, you just want to die. That's just that. That's not even this. If you've been sick for a few days and housebound and not outside and not moving around, and when you get up you hurt, and when you lay down you hurt. If you've ever been sick like that and it's only going to be a few days, ramp that up 10 times or 20 times and be in constant pain. And, it's almost like he would, I don't know, just, you can imagine just wanting the suffering to stop. And it's not. So, even still, his attitude is we only take the good from God. We don't take the adversity from God. We don't take the hard times. He has some insight too, doesn't he? Then, if we were to look at this and say, well, she has some insight into this because she says, "Why don't you curse God and die?" The very accusation that Satan would give. Then he has some insight into it too, to say, "Will I only take the good and not the hard times?" You know, he's prepared himself for hard times. He's prepared his heart before the Lord. He's been so much before the Lord, so close to the Lord, that it's a hard time. This is a hard thing to deal with. Everything is gone, and now his health, and he's miserable, and you can't be much more miserable than this. And we'll see. He even says, "Curse is the day that I was born." You know, I wish I had never been born. That's how much suffering he's going through right now. But he's been so close to the Lord that at least on the onset of this, he's able to say, you don't just take the good. God doesn't just allow you to experience good and only good and never bad, never hard, never horrible. You experience that too. We experience everything. A born-again believer in Jesus Christ experiences death. We experience illness. We experience all the hard parts of this life that have come on ultimately because of sin, because of Adam's fall. But things that we contract and things that we go through of no fault of our own. Sometimes it is our fault. Obviously, we get ourselves, because of our greedy or because of our sin or whatever, we get ourselves into bad situations, and it is brought on by our fault. But the reality of it is, whether it's brought by the hand of the enemy because he's asked to be able to test us, because he's made some accusation to God against us, and God says, you know what? Take my servant and go ahead and do what you want with him, but he's going to love me and stick to me anyways, no matter what. Maybe it is that sometimes. Now, it is not always that we are sick or in hard times because of Satan. That's the other extreme in Christianity that says every bad thing is from the devil. It's all a demon of this and a demon of that and a demon, you know. There's one bad guy here. It's Satan. I'm just going to take everything. Okay. There's no, you know, it's not that. And sometimes it comes from him. Sometimes it's a direct testing. Sometimes it's just living in this life. It all for sure tests us. Whether our extreme hard times are coming as a direct result of this kind of conversation between the accuser and the protector of his own children, God, or whether it's you know, I'm living and breathing on planet Earth where germs still exist and whatever, and now I'm sick. Now I'm hurt. Now I've experienced great loss. You know, it all tests us. All of it tests us. I don't think I'm so important that Satan himself would need to ask for me, but that doesn't mean there's never a fallen angel that doesn't ask for me. But at the same time, not everything that's wrong with me or goes wrong in my life is brought on by that. Some of it's just living in a fallen world right now. And it's still, God lets us go through these things to show his glory, his honor. Sometimes it's in a public way. Sometimes it's in a private way, just for him to show himself to you. It's between you and him. Or just within the microcosm of your family. And it's just those who are immediately around you see how you react to something that nobody else even knows about. Every once in a while you hear a testimony from somebody of another person who was important to them, important in their life, saw them go through illness, never had a whole lot, never traveled, never did anything, and to anybody else they would just look like a below average person. But the one testimony they have of that person is that they never complained about anything. Even when they got sick, they didn't complain. They still honored God. They still spoke of the Lord. They still shared the gospel. They never complained, even in death. And that's a great witness of somebody. You know, the idea that you have to have a worldwide name or a national or international ministry, or you need to have some, a church that doubles the population of your town every Sunday morning or whatever it is, to be successful is not. That's not a measure of who you are. It's how you respond in any time, in good or bad. And the when we're talking about integrity, the accusation is, yeah, he's a good guy because you got good things for him. But God is already saying, when he says, if you consider my servant Job, he knows him. He doesn't just not know Job. He doesn't look down and see, well, Job's doing pretty good, so he must be one of mine and he must be really good. And that's awesome, and I'll brag on him a little bit, not knowing him. He knows Job's heart. He knows that he fears him. He knows that he loves him. He knows that, he seeks to honor God. He knows that he puts his family above himself, and that he's good with other people, and he's good for other people. We're going to find out. Young and old came to see him for wisdom. And, God is saying off the bat, he's a man of integrity. All of those things could have destroyed his relationship with God. The great prominence among other people, the wealth, the amount of kids that he had, all of that, to put all of that ahead of God in any fashion, could have destroyed him or destroyed his relationship with the Lord then. He could have turned from receiving from God, like King Saul could have turned from receiving from God to doing his own will and doing his own thing. And look at all the wealth I've built, and look at who I am, and look at how prominent I am, and look at all the favor I have of men. And how great a person I am because I have all of that. He could have just become prideful and he didn't. So he had integrity when things were good. That's one of the times when people walk away from the church, when they walk away from a disciplined relationship with the Lord where they're not sharing anymore. It's because they're wealthy, because things are going great. You see people leave church and drift away and go do their own thing because everything's going good. I don't need the church anymore. And really what they're saying, I don't need God anymore. I've got it going on. I've got this handled. And then when things go bad, then they come back. That's not integrity. Integrity is maintaining that relationship with God and being right before God even when things are great. It's easy to be humbled, at least for a little while, when things are going bad and you go and you cry out to the Lord and, oh, Lord, help me, and oh, this is horrible, and oh, I'm in pain, and oh, I've suffered such loss, and I need you, I need you, I need you. But if it continues like Job's does, Job's continues for a time. This isn't like a 3-day story we're looking at here. This continues for some time. And yet, Job has integrity in good times and in bad times. Now, he's going to, we look at it from our perspective, he's going to waver a little bit. He's going to weaken a lot because he's in a lot of distress. This is a lot of trauma that's happening to him. It happened fast. But even still, when you pay attention to Job's speeches, he kind of builds it up, and you can see where he's struggling and where he's starting to falter a little bit, and then he just almost for no reason pulls back and this is what I know is true. This is how I feel, but this is what I know is true. You're going to see that, I think, in some of these conversations when he begins to speak. There's a frustration with his friends, an accusation, frustration with the situation. Like, what's left? I did well when things were good. I did well when all this bad started. Why don't we just end it and I can go home? How many times do we say that? Within just even this little group right here, how many times have the few of us that are here, the 4 or 5 of us that are here, said, I'm ready to go anytime. I'm done with this. I could be done with this. I don't need to be here anymore. Just take me home. It's kind of the attitude Job has. And maybe it's the kind of attitude that his wife has. She's been traumatized. But maybe at the same time, and I've been hard on his wife before, but maybe, just thinking about this today, maybe she just wants to see her husband stop suffering. On top of everything else, this is too much for her. Now, he does rebuke her. Well, you speak as one of the foolish women. That's kind of a reminder of, listen, you have seen the hand of God on our life. You have seen him provide for us. You have seen him move in our life, which means that probably there have been other low points, not this low, but some low points, some time of we need help, some time of we need some provision before he became very wealthy, before he became very prominent. And, he just says, you speak as one of the foolish women, one of the ones who are easily just tossed to and fro, the ones that, when their husband's good, then he's right. When their husband is making decisions they don't like, well, then he's horrible. And, they're back and forth on their husband, let alone God. And he doesn't defend himself. He just says, think about this. We don't just take the good. We take the bad, too. And God is still God. It's kind of what he's saying here. Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity? And all this, Job did not sin with his lips. He didn't say the wrong thing. In the entire thing, he didn't say the wrong thing. Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom in here. I had to wonder, too, how much pause he has to give before he answers and think about his answer so that he doesn't just shoot his mouth off and say the wrong thing because of emotion. Things that he's saying here are wisdom and knowledge that he's received from the Lord, that he's received by living a life. And he's speaking on the things that he knows. And even in pain and in severe pain and severe loss, he's speaking wisely, like you said. But he's hanging on to what he knows is truth. The truth is still there. The bottom line is, all things come from God. God is in control. He is in control. Whether it looks bad, feels bad, this is not an emotional thing. I'm not going to speak from my emotions. I'm going to speak from what I know is real. And, that's the place to hope to be for all of us. We don't want to be in the big emotional climate that we have now, today in our nation. Everything is high emotion, high emotion, high emotion. And people are responding to one another with such anger and violence and venom at the drop of a hat, at the wearing of a hat. Wear one of Donald Trump's hats out one time. Make America Great Again. It doesn't even say his name on it. It just says Make America Great Again. And people freak out. It's like, what's wrong with our country being great? What's wrong with that? Well, you guys spent so much time and effort trying to tear it down that you're upset that we're trying to build it back up again or what? I don't know. But just the way people flip out, and they don't care how old you are. You had a kid get attacked by a guy in a restaurant because he wore one. And it's not good. It's everything's on emotion. React, and not be still, not be quiet, not think before you speak. Just vomit everything that's inside you right out on everybody who's there. And it's not good. It's not good for our society, and it's not good for us to be that way. And we lose our integrity really fast when we do that. So Verse 11 says, Now when Job's three friends heard of all of this adversity that had come upon him, each one came from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, Zophar the Nemathite, for they had made an appointment together to come and mourn with him and to comfort him. And when they raised their eyes from afar, they did not recognize him. They lifted up their voices and wept, and each one tore his robe and sprinkled dust on his head toward heaven. So they sat down with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his grief was great. It was very great. Well, I'm assuming they did that, but the three of them coming from different places, the four of them close enough that three of them made arrangements to come on the same day at the same time, to meet somewhere and come together to Job, instead of just, I'll go this day. Well, I can't make it that day, but I'll come this day. And they set aside a time. They worked it out, so they were all together. They're going to come together, the four of them. Yeah, three of them coming to him, so four of them all together. Make this appointment. And it was worse than they expected. So when they raised their eyes from afar and did not recognize him, they lifted their voices and wept. And each one tore his robe and sprinkled dust on his head toward heaven. So they do this before they even get to Job. However far off is when they should be able to recognize him. So there's something about these guys, when they would go to visit one another, they were close enough they would recognize each other before they even got there. I went to my 20th high school reunion, and we got out of the car and we're walking up to the park where everybody was at, and I'm not even sure I'm going to recognize anybody. And then off to my left, I see this other guy get out with his wife, and I recognized him. That was, the guy who was my best friend in high school. And then another guy coming up, and he's yelling at both of us, recognized us. And I'm like, dude, man, how did you recognize me? He said, no, I could see how you walked. I recognized the way you walk. That's how much time we spent together. The guy knew me by how I walked. I gained a lot of weight. I had the goatee mustache thing going on. I didn't have the same haircut. I was, 20 years old. It had been 20 years since I seen him. I hadn't been to any other reunions between graduation and that year. I hadn't seen him since 1984. And here we were showing up, and he said, well, yeah, I recognize you by the way you walk. And I can remember being at my dad's one year, and all the boys were there, and my sister, and we're all walking across the yard, me and my dad and my brothers, and Tracy said, I think we only had one other sister-in-law at that point. Only one of my brothers was married. She says, oh my gosh, they all walk the same. So it was that. These guys knew each other so well that a ways away they would be able to know who they were. And the three of them get there and they see him, and they realize it's him, but they didn't know him. He wasn't recognizable. Whatever would make him instantly recognizable and bring happiness to them when they saw him brought mourning to them. They begin to weep even before they got to him. They tear their clothes. They put the ashes on their head before they ever even get to him. So they sat down with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his grief was very great. Sometimes it's the best thing you can do. When you know somebody's grieving, you just sit there. You just sit with them. You just sit close to them. You don't even have to be right on top of them. Let them grieve. What do you say to this guy? We got a whole book here, a pretty long book of what they're going to say to him eventually here, but what do you say when you first walk up to somebody? There's nothing to say. The situation is obvious. This is bad. In 7 days, he probably looked like He could die any moment. What would you say to somebody like that? It's not good. You know, there have been times you go into a hospital and you want to say all the things. There's all the things that get ready to come right out of your mouth right away. First of all, how are you doing? I'm in the hospital. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Sometimes you get that sarcastic back, and so a lot of times it's better to just not say anything or just say very little. Hello is better than how are you doing. That's a greeting that's kind of interchangeable most days, but in certain situations, it's not the best one to give. How are you doing? And sometimes you walk in and you just sit there because they're not awake. I've gone into people's rooms as a pastor and sat in their room, and they're asleep when I get there, and they're still sleeping when I leave. They never woke up. I don't wake them up. I'm not going to wake them up and make them interact with me. They're tired. They're trying to recover. They're in pain, whatever. If they're getting sleep, they need sleep. I'm not waking them up. And I've even had family members try to wake people up. I'm like, no, they don't. I'm here to see them. They don't need to see me. They don't. Just tell them later I was here. You don't need to wake them up and make them have conversation with me like they owe me some kind of honor. Let them sleep. Let them rest. Just, I'll talk to you. I don't need to talk to them. But that's often the better play most of the time, to just sit, and especially in extreme situations, to mourn with them. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to be disturbed at some things that people go through. But the thing is that this is not even, think about it, it's not like he's in his own bed, in his own place, likely. He's in a dump. He's not in a normal place, in a place of grandeur. He's not with an entourage of servants around him and people fanning him or shading him. He's not in a good place physically, emotionally. He's just done. And he looks like he's going to die. And maybe he's even been moved by people out to this point and left kind of for dead. Just waiting for him to die, because this is what it looks like is going to happen to him. And, he's just, you go and you sit with him in that. Many people won't even do that. If the person's not in a good place for me, why would I go and sit with them? I'm not, who would go sit in a dump with somebody who's not doing good? You kind of stand back and take a look and think, man, this is how it ends, and go home and make preparations for yourself to make sure it doesn't happen to you that way or something. I don't know. It's just, sometimes you go and you sit with people who are hurting in some bad places, and you sit on some chairs and furniture that you wouldn't normally sit on, and you wait in a house that is not a house you would normally go into, and because some people just, and you go into places, even places that would be normal and be like a hospital room for us. And you would think that the family would be gathered there, and you see tight families, you see close families where that's what happens. The room is full of people waiting. And you go to some others, and the waiting room is full, but only one or two people will go back. And they only go back to check. And they come out and they say, I needed a break. I can't, somebody else needs to go in there and sit with them for a little while so I can take a break. It's not always a good situation. People don't always deal with things the same way. And that person is suffering, and they literally don't have anybody with them. We have ministries of people who go into hospitals and just sit with somebody they don't even know who's dying so that they don't die alone. And that's their whole thing. That's what they do. They're not sitting with people who have a room full of families. They're sitting with homeless people who have been picked up off the street and they're in their last moments, and so somebody's just sitting there because there is no family, there is no friend, and they just sit there, hold their hand, talk to them nice, and be nice to them, just so they won't die alone. That's pretty amazing. And for somebody to do that over and over again, that's a special person, to be honest with you, that can do that. Anyhow, it is when somebody's grieving greatly like this, we all really need to pray that God will strengthen us, fill us with His Spirit, so that we will set ourselves aside to be able to minister to that person and those who are around them in the best way that honors God. And it's not always having the right verse. It's being compassionate. It's being there. It's whatever it is for the moment. However you can serve God. And you do it out of a heart for God first, and that'll give you a heart for that person who needs you to be there. And it's not easy. It's not always easy. I know people who, can't bring themselves to even go into a hospital. Don't want to even see people who just going for a normal procedure and are going to be out in a day or two and nothing was even close to going wrong, and they still don't want to be there. They still don't want to be in the hospital, and that's, a form of selfishness. And that you can't give up yourself. You can't get past yourself to go in and even be an encouragement to somebody. So just be sensitive. We need to prepare ourselves for both ends of this story. And we're just going to stop here with chapter 2. I thought we'd get through chapter 3 through 2, but we need to be prepared to be Job at one level or another, where we experience loss, we don't dishonor God. We experience illness, we don't dishonor God. Horrible things happen around us, we don't dishonor God. We make up our mind now, no matter what, we're going to maintain that integrity with God. We're going to be able to own it. If it's our own fault that we're going through something, we own it. It's not God's fault. We're still going to honor God. If it's nobody's fault, we can't put the finger on anybody. We don't sit there and contemplate and tear it up and spit it back out until we can try to pin it on somebody. And if we can't, we turn it on God. He's in control no matter what, good or bad. We need to prepare ourselves to be Job's friends in this 7-day period. They start off really great. To be his friends. To be able to be quiet with somebody and just let our presence even be the avenue that God uses the Spirit to minister to them. Maybe it's just our presence. Maybe it's them waking up after 7 days of not being able to move or sleep or 7 days of from what I can understand here, Job is like out of it for the 7 days. He speaks first. They don't speak to him until he speaks first. So, maybe he's a little delirious. Maybe he's moaning and groaning all the time and in great pain. People open their eyes and see you and you're sitting there and you're, whether you're asleep because you've been there so long that you just, you're taking your nap while you're taking your turn or whatever, or you're praying or you're reading your Bible or you got an earbud in or whatever so that you can hear some music and whatnot. But just your presence will minister to people, and especially if you're sitting there and you're praying for them, you're praying for the family, the Spirit is flowing through you without speaking a word, without standing up and constantly putting your hands on them to pray for them and whatever else. Just pray. You don't have to cry out and carry on and all that other business either. You don't have to have all the wisdom, all your wisdom, what you think are the right things to say. Just be quiet and be with them. And God will use you as an avenue to show his love for those people in that moment without you saying a word. and pray for wisdom. I mean, in that quiet time, be praying for wisdom that you're supposed to say when the opportunity does come. Whether it's to somebody else who's associated with this person or to the person when they finally acknowledge that you're there. Whatever. But, and it's okay to weep and to mourn for people who are going through hard times. And to go ahead and be emotionally attached to that person and let your heart break with theirs so that they don't feel alone. And it's okay to, listen, just follow what the Lord says. But prepare yourself for those moments to be able to step in, because other people can't. They don't prepare themselves. They're not ready. Everything happens to them in a moment's notice, whether it's good or bad, because they don't prepare their hearts to receive anything good or bad. Everything is fly by the seat of their pants. Everything's, happening in the moment. They only live in the moment because everything else is too scary for them. And just in the moment is what you can control, And for sure, Jesus is the one that said, don't worry about yesterday or tomorrow. Can't change yesterday. You can't do anything about tomorrow. It has enough of its own when it finally gets here. Just concentrate on today. But, so I'm not telling you to let your imagination run wild with a certain person or anything like that. Just prepare yourself to be a ministering saint to those who are hurting around us, in whatever fashion or capacity that God gives us to do it. And whether we are able to have some kind of ministry where we reach out to this community, or it's one person that you individually minister to. If we lose sight of that, if we're not ready to minister, if we don't prepare ourselves to do it, then when the opportunity is there, we either do it begrudgingly and we'll end up being like Job's friends are, or we won't do it at all. And that's not good. That's not right either. So we want to be wise when we give counsel. We want to be wise in our actions, but we want to be ready. We want to be ready for it. And understand that you're never 100% ready for whatever's going to happen, because you don't know what's going to happen. You just trust God with that too. So be ready to be Job. Be ready to be a minister. So anyways, let's leave it at that. Father, thank you for your word. Lord, thank you for this encouragement. I hope it's encouraging to everybody. Lord, help us to be ready. We look forward to your coming. We look forward to hearing you and seeing your face and hearing your voice and feeling your touch. Lord, we long for it. But at the same time, Lord, I hope that the intensity increases to want to serve on your behalf here. That we would be faithful, that we would have integrity in our own comings and goings in our own lives, as far as when we have and when we don't have, that we can, as Paul said, be content when we're full, when we're hungry, when we have, when we don't have, when we're healthy, when we're sick, that we can be content, that we can be still honoring to you. And Lord, that we would be great servants of yours and examples of your love and your grace and mercy to those around us who need it, who would otherwise be alone and would never hear about you, would never see a servant of yours. Lord, let us be a light in this world as long as we're here. Prepare us for that, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.